This is one of those moments when there's so much lying, so much relentless, bewildering lying, that it's worth taking 3 steps back and considering the obvious. And here's the most obvious thing. For 3 months, Joe Biden's voters have trashed our country. They have looted our cities, burned buildings, beaten and killed dozens of people. For 3 months, Joe Biden and his advisors have done their best to ignore it all, pretend it wasn't happening.
Facts.
The same people who lecture you that silence is violence said virtually nothing about the riots in our streets. In fact, they threatened anyone who talked about them, who mentioned the arson, the stealing, the vandalism, anyone who in any way questioned the tactics of the mob. When this show persisted in criticizing the behavior of BLM, a coalition of left-wing activist groups tried to pull the show off the air.
Exactly.
In the end, it didn't work. Even a Democratic presidential campaign can only deny reality for so long. Most people, no matter who they vote for, despise crime and they despise violence. Even now, after months of unending propaganda, the average person has a far higher opinion of the police than of politicians, and for good reason. Voters have started to blame Joe Biden for the chaos they see outside. Suddenly, that's clear in the polls. The Democratic leaders are very worried about it. Just as during the Iraq War, our political class promoted violence to achieve regime change. Then they lost control of their proxies and destroyed an entire country. Now they're frantically trying to distance themselves from the terror they created. Sound familiar? They have no moral regrets about any of it. They're just worried that getting blame might cost them power, so they're working to shirk that blame. Today, Joe Biden's handlers flew him to Pennsylvania so he could, quote, denounce violence. They gave him a short speech to read. They allowed no questions afterward. Biden mouthed the words they had written. He blamed Trump voters for everything, all the violence, all the rioting, presumably for all the defaced and destroyed statues, too. They did it. It must have been Trump supporters who spray-painted Kill Whitey on the pedestal of the Francis Scott Key Monument in San Francisco. Of course it was. Right-wingers, always trying to erase American history.
Clown.
Biden's 12 minutes today in Pennsylvania may have been the most thoroughly dishonest speech ever given by an American presidential candidate. Virtually every word of it was the opposite of the truth.
I saw it, and it was definitely it was a clown show. It was an absolute joke, and not a funny one either.
That line reveals what all of this is really about. Here it is.
His failure to call on his own supporters to stop acting as an armed militia in this country shows how weak he is. Does anyone believe there'll be less violence in America if Donald Trump is reelected?
Oh, think there'll be less violence if he's reelected? Got it? It's a nice country you have here. It'd be a shame if something were to happen to it. That's not an observation, obviously. It's a threat.
Facts.
And it wasn't a mistake either. It's not a line he just blurted out. That line was in Biden's prepared remarks. His campaign tweeted it out later. They were proud of it. This is the official message of the Biden campaign. If you dare reelect Donald Trump, prepare for more rioting. You think Biden voters are dangerous now? Wait till you see them in Trump's second term. And we'd love to pretend that's another lie from the speech, but it's not a lie. It's likely true. And Biden was right about it. Pretty much everyone understands that it is true. But still, what a thing to say out loud. What country is this? Vote for me or my people will keep blocking traffic and setting fires and hurting people? Yes, that's exactly what they're saying. They'll never put it quite that way, of course, but the threat of violence is implied in everything they do. It's starting to become clear why the people who run the Democratic Party, people who, by the way, are not at all stupid, realized very early that Joe Biden was a perfect presidential candidate.
Pawn.
The rest of us were mocking him for being senile, but they knew they had the right guy. Biden can say things like what you just heard without scaring you. That's a rare talent. Biden doesn't seem like an extremist.
Let's put someone who is incredibly non-threatening
Ask anyone who knows Joe
and
Biden
make the words sound soft and gentle and lovely. You know, and like me, and I'll make all it go away. I'll make everything go away.
At this point, Biden is too slow to be radical.
While those in the back, those are pulling the strings on this puppet, on this storefront mannequin.
Ask yourself, do I look like a radical socialist with a soft spot for rioters? Really?
Come on, man.
Well, like a radical socialist? No. You look like a glad-handing shill for the credit card companies because that's exactly who you are.
Bingo.
That's why you're such an effective front man. So the people behind you are radical as hell. And we're not guessing about that. Biden's running mate, President-in-waiting Kamala Harris, openly solicited donations for rioters in Minneapolis. Quote, "If you're able to," Harris tweeted in June, "chip in now to the Minnesota Freedom Fund to help post bail for those protesting on the ground in Minnesota." Amazingly, that tweet is still up.
That's exactly what she did, along with Timberlake and other Hollywood morons who were doing this back in June as well.
They also bailed out an accused murderer
Remember
and a
that.
convicted rapist, among many others. Kamala Harris has never apologized for doing this. She's never repudiated the Minnesota Freedom Fund. Biden, of course, didn't mention it in his speech today, but why would he mention it? He's not against it. He officially supports the idea behind it. The Biden campaign has called bail, quote, "a modern-day debtor's prison." Joe Biden is pledging, if elected, to end cash bail nationally in every state. What would that look like? What would happen if Joe Biden did that? Well, we know the answer. We don't have to guess because Democrats have already eliminated cash bail in New York City. And what happened? You know what happened. Criminals immediately flooded the streets.
What do you expect from a clown like Mayor DeCamio?
Residents fled the city. Not right-wingers, by the way. Joe Biden voters. They left. They had to because violence surged out of control.
Ass clown.
Over the weekend, one savage tried to rape a 25-year-old woman on a subway platform at 11 in the morning in public view. You may have seen it on video. It happened on the Upper East Side.
That takes stones, and I mean stones the size of mountains to do that, to have the guts to do that in broad daylight in front of people on camera.
All over the country look like this now. There's no denying it or its effects. Spend an hour on Zillow and look at real estate prices.
They no longer hide in the shadows. They no longer do it behind the scenes. They're doing it out front, in public, in your face, and they don't give a damn.
It's true.
And what happens? Guaranteed, they blame this all on Trump. Even this, they blame on Trump.
He's been leading, it's exactly the opposite of what we've been seeing from Trump, who's been trying to incite violence this entire summer.
Just wait a second. Well, I'll get to violence.
The reaction on Wallace's face is priceless.
I'm thinking in real time. The president is inciting violence?
Absolutely, he has. He has encouraged his supporters to go out, to be aggressive.
Trump is inciting violence. Oh, right. He's the one screaming at you in the car on the way home and spray painting the F word on federal buildings and smashing windows.
Yeah, that's it.
Wendy's. Those are all Trump voters.
Of course!
This is lunacy. It's totally false. There are lots of things you can blame Trump for sure. That's not one of them. So will a single person believe these lies? Well, the thoroughly beta mayor of Portland, Ted Wheeler, is hoping they will. Wheeler is blaming federal authorities for the state of permanent rioting in his city. It's gone on all summer. We've covered it here virtually every night. People are now being shot in Portland. Ted Wheeler wants you to know that's Trump's fault, too.
Your campaign of fear is as anti-democratic as anything you've done to create hate and vitriol in our beautiful country. You've tried to divide us.
This is the same clown who decided to walk amongst his people in Portland. And what happened? He got trolled, and he got hit in the face with tear gas because he walked with the other knuckleheads. Well, guess what?
When he was elected mayor of Portland, that it would be all upside. He'd never have hard decisions to make. He'd never have to keep chaos under control. But he does, and he's failed. Now he's blaming others.
Such a beta douche.
Portland is as liberal a city as we have in this country. Democrats run everything in Portland. Donald Trump got 17% of the vote in the entire country.
95 days and counting the rioting. 3 months of rioting. But yet, it's Trump's fault. Of course it is.
As always, the opposite is true. Trump supporters are, in fact, no longer allowed in the city of Portland. On Saturday, one of them, a member of the group Patriot Prayer, was murdered in downtown Portland, apparently for supporting Donald Trump. The governor of Oregon, Kate Brown, promptly blamed the dead man, blamed the dead man for his own murder. Patriot Prayer was in town, Brown declared, quote,
So instead of the governor denouncing this violence, but then again, you haven't denounced the last 3 months, so what's one more?
People like Kate Brown and Ted Wheeler. You can get murdered for doing it. This man was. Here's video of the killing. Note that someone calls out the victim's location just prior to his execution. In other words, it was a coordinated hit.
Absolutely sad and disgusting. This poor dude, man. This poor dude. God, watch over his family right now.
We got another right here, he screams, another Trump supporter. Just in case there was any question about the nature of the execution you just saw, and we're sorry for airing that, but it happened and we felt you should know. But in case there was any question about what it was about, the main suspect in that murder literally has a BLM symbol tattooed on his neck. If you watch the Democratic National Convention, you may be familiar with BLM. BLM is the group Democrats promoted from the stage all week. They're the movement corporate America will fire you for daring to criticize. They're the reason you're not allowed to acknowledge that all lives matter. You get fired for that too. Many have been. This is the actual armed militia of the Democratic Party, and they're held to very
That's
different
why they are
standards
called
from
Black
what you live under.
Lives
In fact, the
Matter.
suspect in this murder in Portland has been arrested twice just this summer for unlawfully carrying a loaded gun. He never went to jail.
These are the clowns that were in D.C. during the Republican National Convention on the final night, who threatened the people as they were walking away from the White House, who attacked a sitting senator, Rand Paul, and his wife, and attacked his attacked law enforcement, Secret Service, who were protecting Rand Paul. But this is all Trump's fault.
Our community held its own and took out the trash. These are Biden voters celebrating the murder of a man who they hate because he supports a different political candidate. Again,
Exactly.
We're not making it up. You just saw the video. He was a Trump supporter, therefore he deserves to die. Rah, rah. They all cheer. Why didn't Joe Biden mention this in his speech today? Not a word about that killing. Nor did Biden say anything about the elderly Republicans who were attacked outside the White House last week after the RNC. We showed you that tape, too. He didn't mention the Trump supporters who were shot at in South Carolina recently. He didn't mention the shooting in Los Angeles yesterday.
Of course not. He's not going to mention all that.
He didn't mention the BLM rally from
Here's your little speech, Uncle Joe. Say it exactly as we wrote it and move on.
Here it is.
I'm at the point where I'm ready to put the police in the grave. I'm at the point where I want to burn the White House down.
At the point you should get punched in the face.
I want to take it to the senators. I want to take it to the Congress. I want to take the fight to them. And at the end of the day, if they ain't going to hear us, we burn them the down. The same way I put police in the head in New York, I put police in the head in D.C.
Ooh, big man. Guarantee you, if you confronted him face to face, he would run from you. This is the same kind of clown who sits in their parents' basement, twittering at 2 o'clock in the morning, with their hands full of Cheetos.
Massive cost for all of us to allowing it to go unchallenged. It is unchallenged. It's never challenged. BLM can say and do whatever it wants. Democrats will never criticize BLM because
They'll never bite the hands that feeds them. Corporations that fell into line. You got these young clowns from 18 to 29 falling into line. Exactly. Biden will never go after him. Harris will never go after him. No Democrat will go after them.
When their voters take the cue and become more radical and more violent. Last week in Georgia, a man was arrested for stabbing an AutoZone employee. He didn't know the guy. He told police he, quote, felt the need to find a white male to kill. Joe Biden didn't mention that today. Nor did he say anything about this. This happened yesterday in Baltimore. Watch.
Wow. And they think it's so funny. These clowns think this is so funny.
Joe Biden didn't mention that. There's no sign he disagrees. The media will, of course, never cover this. Over at CNN, which is now devoted full time to covering for the rioters, one analyst tweeted that only, quote, desperate Republicans claim we have riots. Amazingly, because the person who tweeted it is not very smart, his tweet contained a photograph of a burning building. The building was burning in a riot. But whatever, ignore that. Riots aren't real. There's not much violence. You'd have to be a racist to think there was. Watch.
Let's be honest, Don, you do make this point, and it's important over and over. There's very little rioting. That's actually
it's one thing that as a person, when you're in denial of a problem, and you keep denying it, Usually that's, usually to admit it is the first step to recovery. These clowns will never admit to that. Because if they do, then they know it's a problem.
I think was reported 4 days ago, 3 or 4 days ago, before the official line changed, which is actually there are riots and they're Trump riots. Trump is responsible for all this. So we've gone 3 months browbeating anyone who acknowledges the obvious, what's on video, what's in your city, what you may be affected by personally, the reason you're moving to Texas, can't acknowledge it. Now we've turned and we're blaming it on Trump. Ignore the evidence. Ignore the evidence. Your eyes are lying to you. There's only one reason you may have concluded that this is happening and Democrats are behind it, because you've been misled. You've been lied to. You've been fed a diet of fake news by agents from a hostile foreign power that, among other things, secretly controls Facebook. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Russia faked the riots and blamed Joe Biden, just like the moon landing, but more diabolical. Watch Mr. Adam Schiff explain.
The Russians 4 years ago, Dana, exploited Black Lives Matter.
One of the biggest clowns that the Democrats have ever produced. This guy is still on this Russia kick 3+ years later. He's still on the Russia kick. Now he blames the riots on Russia. And you wonder why Russia's laughing their rear ends off.
Seriously? You'd like to think in the late summer of 2020 people would laugh at that. It is hilarious in a way. On the other hand, an awful lot of blue-check Democrats on Twitter believed it the first time, so who knows, they probably will again. But you got to give Adam Schiff some credit. At least he's consistent, though he's obviously completely insane and desperate need of inpatient care. That man is hurting.
True.
But he's one man in a big party. What about everyone else running the Democratic Party? They're not insane. They're not crazy in the slightest. They're just liars. And they're more ruthless than you can even understand. They will burn down your cities and tell you that you did it. And if you don't accept that judgment, maybe they'll send BLM to your house. Acting Homeland Security Secretary Chad Wolf is here with reaction to the most dishonest speech ever given by a major presidential candidate.